Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to another Webinar Wednesday hosted by Cal State Bakersfield Small Business Development Center. Good afternoon, I'm Kelly Bearden. I am the director of the SBDC here in Bakersfield, and welcome to another number 262 in our webinar series that is now in its 11th year. Got a great program today. It's going to be fantastic. Chuck Eason is with us, and he's going to be talking about a great topic where there's plenty of money. Just, do you have plenty of good ideas for it? So a preview of today, February the 8th, is innovation is our focus today. Innovation in technology with the SBIR program and the Small Business Innovation Research Program. Really is one of my pet peeves is that we just don't have enough clients in our Central California region that actually receive this. And there is so much money, as you're going to find, that goes out annually in this particular program, and so many opportunities that are still coming along. So we'll get into that in just a little bit. We have our Capital Quarter, our weekly feature, featuring a little bit of state, local, and federal today. Some interesting comments yesterday in our economic quarter that we'll talk briefly about from the Fed Chief Powell, and what he commented on the jobs report that came out last Friday. 3.7 billion. Please take some of this SBIR. You'll make me a very happy man. We have some notable news today that we're going to want to share with you. And just a little tease as we move forward. It might affect your weekend. My notable news today could possibly, if you're an early bird, it might affect your weekend. The business news and information that you need in 2023 is here on Webinar Wednesday. And as always, we'll take your questions at the end, and we're going to go with a very simple poll today. That's correct. Last week, you got the big, massive 4-question whimsical, and I heard some great comments. We'll be back with that next week, but just a brief poll. And you might have seen it before. It's one of our top questions where we're getting a large sample size and going to share the results next week. But actually, the poll question that I both started and stopped. I haven't done that before. So let's relaunch the poll here. And we're relaunching the poll. It's just, what are your plans for hiring in 2023? You hope to add staff. You hope to retain your current staff. I would like to reduce my current levels, and I don't have or plan on any employees. Well, there's 4 choices for you. It's really interesting. A lot of the reports that have been coming out in the last few weeks about small businesses want to keep hiring, and the Federal Reserve want to keep pushing interest rates up, and to prevent the labor market being so red hot and things like that. So we have kind of a conundrum going where it's kind of conflicting. And we decided to wrap that into our question today. So we do have about 50% of you that are participating in today's poll question for your hiring plans for 2023. You hope to add staff, retain your current levels. Do you want to reduce levels of staff, cut back on employees? Maybe you want to be like the big tech companies and do that, or you don't have any plans for employees. So 57% of you in, and we're going to end the poll right now, share the results with you, and 55% of you do not have any plans or any employees. And not surprising with today's topic, being a great startup tool potentially for entrepreneurship, being the SBIR STTR program. So not overwhelmingly surprised, maybe a little bit, but 55% of you. The other 45% want to add staff. Everybody else seems content. So thank you for sharing that. We'll talk about that probably a little bit more as we continue moving along. So our capital quarter today, our capital access for small businesses. Our local issue is, our local part of this is that the power pitch that we've talked about that is going to be part of the Bakersfield Women's Conference in April is actually extending their deadline for women that are women-based businesses and entrepreneurs here in Kern County. So you can actually apply, go online at bakersfieldwomen.org, and you can still get in. So it's extended till the 10th, this Friday. And see that wonderful check. It's not as big as the golf tournament checks, but I'm sure it's not as big in two ways, actually, but still, it's almost big enough to fit into the ATM machine. So our other state, we've talked for probably a good part of a year about the state small business credit initiative, and that is that $1.18 billion that's coming to California. It's rolling out. We're starting to see clients apply. I don't think they anticipated the interest rates on some of the debt being as high as it is, but it is out there. And we'll get back into that. And we haven't had a good conversation in that, but there are still resources that are available there. And then also on the equity side of things that are rolling out. Our federal side of this is we're going to talk SBIR and STTR. I mean, where else can you get a higher value than $3.7 billion in any of these programs? Probably nowhere. But then again, we still have people that are talking about the employer retention credit, for-profit, nonprofit, the thing that's turned into a real kind of boom and really assistance for a lot of businesses, but you really have to be careful with this one. You really have to be careful. It's tax time. Talk to your tax advisor, your CPA, your financial professional about if it works for you and your particular business, as you do need to oftentimes amend not only payroll tax returns, but go back and amend both business and personal tax returns. And then there's still the potential for the RRF, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, that threw out about $32 billion, but only to less than a third of those who applied. And so now there's a tax credit that's not out. It's still working its way through Congress, but we're hopeful that those that applied and were not able to receive that particular grant will be able to at least get the tax credit and help a very still troubled industry, and that being the food service sector and being actually restaurant businesses. Yeah, I haven't had this slide in here for a while, but there it is, what we call the SSBCI, just another wonderful acronym in our game of acronyms that we throw at you. But it is a program that supports small business, and we'll continue to talk to you about that as I continue to talk very fast today. Our economic corner is just going to focus on the jobs report that came out last week, and it caught the Fed by surprise that hiring remains strong, even though the intent is to continue to drive up interest rates and slow down the economy. We're seeing labor cuts in a lot of large tech businesses. I believe Zoom, ironically, was the latest to announce that they were going to be slashing some jobs, but the tech sector that took on a lot of jobs during the pandemic is reducing employment, getting back to like maybe pandemic levels or pre-pandemic levels. So this was interesting because last week we had an economist on. Everybody that was on last week probably recalls that we had Dr. Nikunde Nichika, and he talked in great detail about some of this stuff. And I even mentioned this, might have been off webinar, about how the jobs report could really affect what the Fed wants to do. And we've been talking about how small businesses still want to hire and are looking to hire, and how that affects everything. So stay tuned on the economic front. Some of the notable news that I'd like to share, and this is the weekend, maybe I'm changing your weekend for the better, at least in my opinion, but the IRS today told millions of taxpayers to hold off filing in 2022 until they issue guidance. And this guidance is going to be on several several state refunds and rebate payments last year through some of the stimulus programs that could count as taxable income. For example, last year, California sent out more than 16 million, to the middle class, and totaled about 9 billion. So 16 million received this special middle tax credit. The IRS is saying, wait a second, we don't know if we're going to say this is taxable or not. You might need to claim it, so you better hold off, maybe potentially on doing your taxes. So what do some in the industry say about that notable news? Well, H&R Block and TurboTax, two of the biggest software producers for those that are doing their own, have taken the position that both California payments are not taxable. So, proceed cautiously. This is going back to pandemic days where we kind of were on the fly dealing with issues that could and could not come back to potentially create more work for us or even haunt us financially. So one opportunity that I want to share with everybody out there is that one of our professors from the School of Business and Public Administration, they're looking for businesses or nonprofits that would like to boost their online presence and work with some students during the spring and fall semesters this year, maybe on SEO and Google ad projects. And you can contact Jimmy. There's Jimmy's email, ZXU3. Man, that's a great email. ZXU3 at csub.edu for more details. Hopefully, if you want to do this, you're looking to bring more customers through the doors and have more of an internet presence. This is through our host, the School of Business and Public Administration, and does not involve our SBDC interns. So we're talking about innovation and technology today. So going to our YouTube channel, which is out there, our YouTube channel has a lot of information. This will be on our YouTube channel very soon. Our SBIR STTR from today with Charles Eason. And Chuck also was not only on 262 today, but he was on webinar 13 back in 2014 with this particular topic.
Wow.
There's some other technology issues as far as IP strategy, being a business strategy. Had Martin Kleckner III do a few things with us on SBIR. We had some stuff on U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, but a lot of stuff out there and a lot of stuff still on innovation and technology. If you want more, contact your SBDC. If you want to use any of these tools, Live Plan, the SBDC Net, our cash flow forecast, we'll be back with Webinar Wednesday. And there's our Webinar Wednesday for not 261, 263. He typos. But I love our special guest today, and today's guest is Charles Eason. Chuck is the SBIR advisor of Tech Futures Group, which is part of the NoCal SBDC program. He's been in statewide leadership positions with the community colleges of California through their economic and workforce development program, coordinated business and entrepreneur programs at 116 community colleges, including here at Bakersfield College. In his positions as a former SBDC director, business incubator, and currently the work that he does with SBIR, Chuck has provided training and consulting to thousands of entrepreneurs over the past 25 years. As that entrepreneur, he has several business ventures. My favorite, as you can read many of those for yourself, is Chuck has been there. He's done that. He has that STTR grant, and he has gone through this particular process probably about 15 years ago. Very interesting project. Not the best timing in the world. And that's sometimes something you really can't really affect in business is the timing. But he's also worked in the aerospace industry, systems engineer, has his engineering degree from UC San Diego, and an MBA from Cal State University San Bernardino, almost a runner. But it's interesting getting that engineering sciences degree and then the MBA. Our former dean of our School of Business and Public Administration, John Emery, always said that engineering students were really pre-business, and Chuck points that out. Chuck, thanks for joining us today. It's great to have you here. We're looking forward to an update on the program that had changes last year. So please take it away.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Kelly. It's good to see you again. And thank you for inviting me to share a little bit about the SBIR STTR program. It's something I'm a big fan of. And as Kelly mentioned too, we go back quite a ways. I actually been with the SBDC program since 1995 as the SBDC director. I worked at the Inland Empire SBDC and then director of the Napa Valley College SBDC, and then at Solana College for about 12 years. So we worked together quite a bit over the years. So yeah, this is something I'd love to share information about. It's the Small Business Innovation Research and the Small Business Technology Transfer Program. And I've actually been doing work in this area for, I can't believe it now, 27 years, way back to 1995. My background, I started my career in aerospace industry. I worked for the ballistic missile program right out of college for TRW and down at Norton Air Force Base in San Bernardino. And after we won the Cold War, this is back, after the Reagan and Bush years, and then after we won the Cold War, we didn't need any more nuclear missile systems, so I had to shift careers a little bit. It was a tough time for aerospace engineers, particularly in Southern California, and I had worked at Norton Air Force Base down there, which ended up closing down. And they wanted to get things going at the base there again. So I actually volunteered to write the business plan to create a business incubator there. And that was managed by the Inland Empire Small Business Development Center. So that was my first exposure with SBDC as the manager incubator there. But yeah, that's where I was first exposed to the SBIR program is, after they closed the base down, it was like a ghost town around the base, but we had all these laid off engineers that were still in the area. And another bright guy that worked at TRW worked out as well. He from Caltech, and he had just received what's called a Phase I grant, and I'll tell you about the different phases of the program in a minute. But he had received a Phase I award through the Army White Sands Test Range, and he was developing some software when you shoot down a missile or plane, kind of the free fly zone. And I remember he had 2 or 3 people part-time with him, and it was our first tenant at the incubator. So when he moved in, I helped him write his Phase II grant, and he was successful in getting that. Was the first graduate out of incubator. Went on to win multiple of these SBIR awards and grew his company to about 90 employees. And one thing I remember about the process too, a lot of us, working in the ballistic missile program had our classified, either secret or top secret classifications, but he was dealing with some secret material. So he had to bring this huge safe into the incubator to store all his documents for the project. But I've seen this over and over again over the last 25 years where, small companies, usually most of my clients are say between 1 and 5 employees. They can get some SBIR funding and launch their companies. And even though the federal government's funding what they're doing, they retain the worldwide patent rights, whatever technology they're developing. So I'm a big fan of the program. And I know when I moved up here in 1997 to become the director of the Small Business Development Center at Napa Valley College, one of the first things I did was put on a 2.5-day training program for how to go after SBIR grants. And we had a full day proposal writing workshop the first day, and then we had a cost proposal the next day, and then we brought in UC Davis and UC Berkeley for some of the IP people, intellectual property people on the third day. But I remember we had another client that attended. He was working at Day Laboratories in Napa, and he was developing this technology. There's a patch that you put on your skin, and it would change colors with detect alcohol levels. So, law enforcement applications and other things. And he ended up getting a Phase I grant with NIH for $110,000, and then went on to get a Phase II award. And he and his wife, they quit their jobs at Day Laboratories and launched their company. So again, seen this many times with these small companies to get this funding to launch their company. So glad to have the opportunity to share with you a little bit about the program. So I've worked with hundreds of clients, both through what's called Tech Futures Group here at the NorCal SBDC. It's a specialty program within NorCal SBDC. It's been going for about 12 years now. I've probably worked with 500 or 600 clients in this area, and then I'm also doing work with the Silicon Valley SBDC as their SBIR specialist. But after doing it, I kind of got the itch as well to do it myself. I got what's called an NSF Phase I, Phase II grant, and then what's called a Phase II CC grant. But we were basically doing a technology for around 3D printing of houses. So we could take any 3D CAD model, like this CAD model of a Buddha here. This is a 25-foot tall Buddha that was built. We could build things the size of a house, basically. You can see here Dr. Thomas, who is my co-principal investigator at the university, just to give you a scale. And this was out of layers of foam that were cut with a 4-axis water jet. And the technology, we called it shape maker. It was basically what we call thick layer object manufacturing. So the additive manufacturing process. There's not a big market for 25-foot tall Buddhas. So the 2 of these were constructed. One is actually spray painted gold down in a temple down in Santa Cruz. And then my concept was to apply that to the construction industry. So In our Phase I project, we did a 1/12 scale model of my house here in Green Valley, and then we also did a full-scale curved staircase. And then what's called Phase II, we did a full-scale structure. This is me in the mechanical engineering lab there. And think of these are like tech blocks or giant Lego blocks. So the idea was to prefabricate everything in a factory and ship it out on site to build structures. As Kelly mentioned, my timing has not been too good on real estate ever. The idea actually came when I was still working at TRW. I got laid off back in December 1991, but just before I was laid off, we were experiencing this real estate boom. I remember prior to the first Gulf War, where we saw this wave of appreciation coming out from Los Angeles. People were camping out overnight for model homes and stuff. So myself and two friends of mine at TRW, we formed a company, OPTEMA Development Corporation, to build a spec house. So we bought a half-acre lot and ended up building a 5-bedroom, 3-bath house. And it took us 6 months to build it, but unfortunately, the first Gulf War broke out during that time. And by the time we finished it, the whole real estate market just took a dive, and everything was going into foreclosure. So I thought, at that time, one of my partners moved into the house, and we ended up selling it later on for less than it cost us to build it. So fast forward about 15 years, I started thinking, well, there's got to be a better way to avoid that market risk, for taking 6 months to build something, if you could build something faster with rapid prototyping. So that's where the idea came from. But then this is back in 2007, 2008 was my Phase I grant, and then had the Phase II grant after that. And if you remember what happened in 2008 to 2010 timeframe, the whole real estate market then took another dive, and everything was going into foreclosure. So we did not go into what's called Phase III commercialization, and I ended up storing a lot of the equipment in my garage for about 10 years. Sold off some of the equipment. I actually sold our $50,000 water jet to a company up here in American Canyon. They do large 3D structures. If you've been to the Sacramento airport, they did the big red rabbit in there, and they did the big horse at the Denver airport. So I sold off some of my equipment to them. But that was my project. So I always figured it's always good to, you learn more by doing things. I've been there doing that. I've been doing counseling and training for many years, but just the specifics of, how the program works, you learn more just by doing it. So that's a little bit about me. So as far as the program, the SBIR program has been around since the 80s, and the mission is really to tap into small businesses and how they can support and stimulate innovation and solve the problems that the federal government have and problems our society may have as well. It's amazing how innovative these small businesses can be. The clients I work with, it's amazing stuff people are coming up with everything from curing cancer to one doing toenail fungus, another one, anti-icing for airplane wings, and people who are taking carbon out of the air and making fabric from it. It's just amazing, some of the technologies that these small businesses come up with. And the funding really is to help you. You might have seen this chart probably in different formats. It's what we call a valley of death. So, typically over on the left-hand side, you see these federally funded research ideas. So there might be some new technologies being developed, but how do you get it over to commercialization into actual products? You have to cross that chasm. And how do you get across there? So it might be through getting some angel or VC funding, but this SBIR funding can help you at least get maybe part of the way across that chasm. So you see the quote here, it says, research is the transformation of money into knowledge, and innovation is a transformation of knowledge into money. So one reason I'm a big fan of the program is you get up to a couple $1 million of non-dilutive funding for your company. And when I was the SBDC director, we used to get people walking in all the time asking if there's grant money for their businesses. And if they're a for-profit small business, and generally say, no, it's very difficult, it's very limited. If you're a nonprofit, 501c3, then you could go after foundation grant money, but it is challenging if you're a for-profit. But what I like about this program, it's one of the exceptions to the rule, is you actually, to be eligible, you have to be a for-profit small business to apply for it. And not only does the federal government provide you up to a couple $1 million in funding, but even though the federal government's funding what you're developing, you still retain worldwide patent rights to what you're developing. So you have those intellectual property rights. And there's a few exceptions where they could use it, like for national emergency or what they call march-in rights. If you fail to commercialize it, then they could have a right to come in and have someone else maybe commercialize it if they need it, if there's a national need for Department of Defense or whoever it might be. And that agencies do have to keep all the information confidential now for 20 years, basically after you apply for the funding. So this is a federal program, and there's 11 agencies that participate. Congress requires agencies to have a certain size R&D budget, like the top 5 here have over $1 billion budget. These agencies here at the bottom have over $100 million budget. They're required to set aside or allocate 3.2% of their extramural R&D budget for the what's called the SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Program, and then 0.45% for the STTR, which stands for Small Business Technology Transfer. And I have a slide later on that explains the difference between the two. So the large ones, the top 5 participate in both, and the smaller ones only participate in this SBIR program. So that 3.2% for SBIR and 0.45%, it works out to close to $4 billion. It's available every year. And I always like to show this pie chart so you can see where is the money going. So when you go, searching for some of this funding, you know where to look. So you see here, for example, the Department of Defense, DoD, has almost half the pie because they have the largest R&D budget. So you multiply that times 3.2%, they have the largest SBIR budget as well. And then National Institutes of Health, NIH, or Health and Human Services, they have about another quarter of the pie. So between those two agencies, they have 3/4 of the pie. And then that last quarter of the pie is all the other ones, all the remaining 11. So you got Department of Energy, NASA, National Science Foundation. And then the small slivers here are like the EPA, Department of Transportation, Department of Education. So you can get an idea where is the funding going. The other thing I like to point out in this chart, you see here the green for granting agencies and blue for contracting agencies. So there's slight differences in how they get the money out. So in both cases, you get the money from the federal government and you don't have to pay it back. Even if you fail, you don't have to pay it back. So it's a grant from that sense. But some of them use a contract mechanism versus some might use a grant mechanism. So when you see, for example, the blue, the contracting agencies like the Department of Defense or NASA, one of the differences for them, when you look at the topics that they're looking to fund, they're very specific. For like the DoD, so they propose the problem, you propose the solution. So if it's like for new fuel cell for a soldier in the field, they'll give you the exact specifications, the weight requirements, the power requirements, cycle time. They'll tell you exactly what they want you to do in phase 1 in terms of a prototype. So it's very specific with the DoD. And the granting agencies, on the other hand, like the National Science Foundation or National Institutes of Health, they have very broad topics. So you get to propose both the problem and the solution as long as you fit under one of their broader topic areas. So I kind of like, working with the granting agency. Sometimes they're a little easier to, fit into sometimes versus the DoD or NASA. Although the SBIR program was just reauthorized September 30th for another 3 years. And under the reauthorization, they're requiring like the DoD, all the branches to do what they call open topics. So the Air Force has been doing that for a few years under AFORS, but now in the Army starting to do it. But they have to at least once a year have what they call open topic solicitation, where you can propose, maybe you have a technology innovation, you can propose to them, you think this is something that you might be able to use, versus them proposing a specific problem. So there's also open topics under the DoD now as well. And the DoD, each one of the agencies has their own personality. The DoD usually wants to see that first you have to solve their problem, what they have, but then they want to see that have what they call dual use application. So not only does it solve their problem, but there's a dual use or application outside of the Department of Defense, another commercial application. So they don't want to be the only ones invest in the technology. I know when I worked in the ballistic missile program at TRW, we were always looking at, are we using commercial off-the-shelf technology or developing, specific technology. So they want that whole supply chain issue is a big issue with the DoD. Another difference too between the granting and contracting agencies I always like to point out is the granting agencies like the National Science Foundation, which I was funded under, or NIH, they're not going to buy anything from you. So they're not going to become your customers. So they'll fund what's called a Phase I and Phase II research effort, but they're not going to buy anything from you. Whereas the contracting agencies like the DoD or NASA, if you solve their problem in what's called the Phase I or Phase II, they could become a Phase III customer. They have to use a different pot of money. It's not SBIR funds, but they could actually be a customer of yours. So that's an advantage, I guess, of working with the contracting agencies, is they could become one of your first customers for whatever your innovation is. The other difference between the granting contracting agencies is how they review proposals. The DoD, they use internal reviewers, so it'd be like Air Force or civil service people, whoever's working in that weapon system, or they have hospitals as well. I'm up here by Travis Air Force Base. We have a full-size hospital, David Grant Medical Center, so they do medical research and other things. But they can, since they use internal reviewers in their contract, I think they're required by law to give you an answer within 90 days, so they can move a little faster. Whereas like the granting agencies, NSF or NIH, they use external reviewers. So that's usually have to pull together 3 or 4 people to review your proposal. Then they do an internal review. Then they decide whether they have funding to fund the project. And they all right now are taking 5 to 6 months. So that's the downside. I always say I'm a big fan of the program. You get a couple $1 million in funding. You retain worldwide patent rights to it. The downside is it's a government program, and just how long it takes them to go through the process. Once you submit, you just sit and wait, basically for 5 to 6 months to find out whether you're funded. So that's something you need to keep in mind from your corporate strategy, whether it'll work for you as well. And the purpose of the program is to fund research and development work. So you cannot use the SBIR funds for marketing, for business development, for manufacturing. You can't use it to pay for patent expenses directly, although they allow you what's called a 7% fee or profit that you could use for patents. So that's something to keep in mind. It is for developing kind of cutting edge technologies where you need to do some research and development and demonstrate feasibility. As far as eligibility, as I mentioned before, it's one of the exceptions to the rule as far as grants. You have to be a small business, for-profit business. And they do have a requirement also that you have to be 51% owned by a U.S. citizen or permanent resident alien. They do now, with the last reauthorization, now allow venture capital ownership. So you could have venture capital ownership of your company as well. And you have to be a small business, which SBA defines roughly, you go up to 500 employees. And most of my clients, again, are 5 or fewer. I'd say, I'll show you a chart. The next chart shows you most of these people applying are definitely small, 20 or fewer employees. Another eligibility thing, it's sometimes can be a challenge. You have to have what's called a PI, or principal investigator. So that's the person that's responsible for managing the grant or research effort. And that person must be primarily employed with the small business and it's that time of award. And when they say primary employed, that means you can't work more than 49% somewhere else. And they base it on a 40-hour work week. So you can't say I'm working 40 hours somewhere and I'm going to work 40 hours in my business, so I'm 50% time. So it's based on a 40-hour work week, which means actually you can't work more than 19.6 hours somewhere else. And again, it's that time of award. So once you apply and then you wait that 5 or 6 months. For example, I was working full-time as the director of the Small Business Development Center when I put my proposal together. So I was up to midnight writing my proposal, and then I was a one-person operation, and I had 2 or 3 people that I was adding to my team. But it was that time of award that I would hire those people. Plus, for me, once I got the award for the Phase I grant, then I had to negotiate with the college for me to drop down to 49% time as the director of the SBDC, so I could be the PI, principal investigator, on my grant. So most of the time, the PI is going to be one of the founders, CEO or CTO of the company. It's hard to convince somebody to quit their job, to do a 6-month Phase I grant when there's no guarantee of even going on Phase II. The other eligibility requirement is that since this is federal taxpayer dollars, they want the R&D to be done here in the U.S. So there's some exceptions to that rule. if you can show that the only place you can get it done is somewhere outside the U.S., you have to apply to the agency to get approval for that. For example, I had a client up here in Vallejo in the North Bay who was applied to the National Institutes of Health. They're developing this heart medication that's based on a snake venom. And a lot of the research has been done by a university down in South America. So they were able to get approval from NIH to allow them to do some of the R&D effort down that way. So that's the eligibility requirements. Here's the chart I was mentioning that shows you kind of distribution of who's getting the awards. One nice thing is not a rigged program. A lot of them are new. So first time awardees for phase one. And I would say almost all of my clients are under 5, but definitely under that 10 range is where there's a few bigger companies. One of the problems you might hear with the SBIR program too, they have what they call SBIR mills, where there is these companies who are getting 20, 30, 50 SBIR phase ones and then phase twos, but they never commercialize anything. So they have some requirements now with the reauthorization that you have to show that you have a certain success rate for getting from phase 1 to phase 2, and then phase 1, phase 2 to phase 3, which is commercialization. So how do they dole out that $4 billion that's available every year? So these are the 3 phases. A phase 1 grant is all about demonstrating feasibility. So that's small grants, typically up to say 300,000 over a 6 to 12 month period. So feasibility could be a study, it might be a simulation, it could be a benchtop prototype or breadboard prototype, to demonstrate feasibility. And you typically only have enough money to fund maybe 2 or 3 or a couple, part-time people in a phase 1 grant. So once you've demonstrated feasibility, then you're eligible to go on to phase 2, which is where the real money's at. So that's up to most agencies around $1 million, like for NSF. NIH actually now you can go up to $2 million. For National Institutes of Health, they realize it costs a little more if you're doing clinical trial work or anything like that. And that would be a 2-year effort. So in phase, the way I like to think about it, say you're doing a hardware thing, then phase 1, maybe you do a benchtop prototype in the lab. And then in phase 2, you would be doing a field prototype. So you're testing it in the field. So if it's with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, then it would be literally out in the agriculture field. Maybe you're testing the technology. If it's with the Department of Education, then the field would be, say, testing it in the classroom. If it's with the DoD, it might be testing it with a warfighter. So you're testing it out in the field in kind of real life situations. And then phase 3 is commercialization. So that's where you have to find customers, partners, investors, get to market, that go to market. And you see there's no dollar amount here for phase 2. I don't know why they call it phase 3, even though there's no dollars there. So phase 3 is really the only way you get dollars, as I mentioned, like the contracting agencies, for example, if you solve the problem for DoD or NASA in phase 1, phase 2, they can become a phase 3 customer and buy things from you. In fact, that legislation allows them to do a sole source contract with you if you go through the phase 1, phase 2, but they have to use a different pot of money. So it's not SBIR funds directly, but they call it phase 3. So just to explain a little bit about the difference between SBIR and STTR, the Small Business Innovation Research and the Small Business Technology Transfer. With SBIR, again, that's 3.2% that's allocated for R&D budgets. That is basically where the company can do you can do 100% of the work yourself if you wanted to. But you're allowed to subcontract out up to 1/3 in phase 1 and then 50% in phase 2 of the work. So you could subcontract to a research university, a federal lab, or another company. But you as a small business have to do 2/3 of the work by budget in phase 1. So you can choose to do 100%, or if you wanted to, partner with a university or a federal lab or another company, you could subcontract out. With STTR, which stands for Small Business Technology Transfer, and the idea there was to transfer technologies out of the university or labs, but it doesn't have to be transferring out. It could be you develop the innovation, but then you just need help from a university. You need access to their labs or equipment. In that case, you as the small business have to do a minimum 40% of the work by budget. And then you're mandated or required to subcontract 30% to a research university or a federal lab. And then the other 30% you can, keep, or you can subcontract out. So you could potentially subcontract out to 60% under STTR. So the main difference is you have to subcontract with the research university or federal lab. The topics are all the same. They used to do a different solicitation with different topics, but all agencies pretty much have the same topics, and you just choose whether you want to go SBIR, STTR route. So, it's a much smaller program. The STTR is in the hundreds of millions versus there's several $1 billion available for SBIR. But the money is always made to the small business. So the money goes to you, and then you subcontract with, say, UC Davis or UC Merced or whoever to help you with the project, or for the federal lab. There's certain federal labs that are eligible. They have what they call GO-GOs and GO-COs. So GO-GOs are government-owned, government-operated. GO-COs are government-owned, contractor-operated, like Sandia and Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories. They've been operated by the UCs in the past. So those are GO-COs. Those qualify for research institutions. So you apply, it's a pretty competitive program, but 1 out of 8 to 1 out of 12 are funded. Our goal in working with clients through the SBDC and my role as SBDC advisor is to maybe get you from that 1 in 8 to 1 out of 2, 3, or 4 or something. And then once you have a phase 1 grant, about 1 out of 2 to 1 out of 3, so 30 to 50% go on to phase 2. But keep in mind, your competition is a little stiffer because you're competing against people who already have phase 1 grants. And then phase 3, I don't have real good statistics on that, but I've heard about 1 out of 20, which is only like 5% actually commercialized. So that's kind of where the program falls down. And I think that's where the SBDCs can help out too. How do you make it to actually commercializing your technology? So the first step in the process of applying is researching topics. So you want to find a topic to fit under. The agencies each do a solicitation between 1 to 4 times a year. So the small ones like Department of Education is once a year, and EPA is once a year. The bigger ones, DOD has 3 times a year. NIH has what they call omnibus solicitation 3 times a year. It's due January 5th, April 5th, and September 5th. National Science Foundation has 3 submission windows per year. So they put out this solicitation which has a list of all the topics that they're looking to fund. So you want to look through those and find a topic area. There's a couple ways to do a search. This is the SBIR.gov site. If you go to the SBIR.gov, this is the official SBA funded website, and you can actually do a keyword search of all 11 agencies. So you could search just Department of Defense if you wanted to, or search them all. You can search what's called open topics and closed. So open would mean they're currently accepting applications, they're on the street. Closed would be what did they fund in the past, last year or the last round. I suggest searching both open and closed, because then you can see what did they fund last time, and if you see it, there's a good chance it'll be on the next solicitation when it comes up. The topics don't change too much from one round to the next, particularly for the granting agencies. DOD, they might change a little bit more. So this is one way you can do a search, or you can go directly to the agency website. So the first step, find a topic to fit under, because you can't just submit out of the blue. And then the second step in the process is, whoops, I just, where's my power? There. Second step is to, this is a sample of some NSF topics. So they have 30 topic areas. For example, mine was under advanced manufacturing. So with 3D printing, had an additive manufacturing topic. But they have topics for artificial intelligence, digital health, pharmaceutical technology, space. So you can see kind of in general the broad areas that they have for technology. So once you find a topic, the second step in the process is to contact the topic author or topic monitor, or NSF calls them program director, NIH calls them program officers, DOD calls them TPOCs, technical point of contact. But you want to contact them, and either by email or phone, and run by them what you're proposing, and then see if it's a fit for what they're looking to fund. So that's kind of the second step in the process. You don't want to, submit something if it's not something they'd be interested in. One of the differences between the contracting and granting agencies, with contracting agencies, there's a window of opportunity when you can talk to what they call TPOC. Once they formally release the solicitation and it's open, then you can no longer talk to that person. You can submit questions online, but everybody sees the questions and answers. So it's just from a fairness standpoint for contracting. Whereas the granting agencies like NSF, NIH, you can talk to the program director up to the day before the due date if you wanted to. So if you're going after DOD or NASA or any of the contracting agencies, keep that in mind. There's a window during the pre-solicitation period that you can talk to them. So you want to start early. NSF has implemented a new pitch process. So instead of a full proposal, you have to be invited to submit a proposal. And that's something I help our clients with. The pitch is basically 2 to 3 pages. They have basically 4 boxes that you fill out, 500 words you cut and paste to put what is your technology innovation, 500 words on what are your technical objectives, what are the challenges, what are the technical questions you think you need to answer to demonstrate feasibility. Then 250 words about the market opportunity. That's like 2 paragraphs. Who the customers, what are their pain points, and then 250 words about your company and team. So it works out to about 2 to 3 pages. And it's fairly quick. They say they will get back to you in a month. I've had clients that submit their project pitch in the morning, get an invite to submit a full proposal that afternoon, the next day. So it could be from a day to a couple of weeks. And then once your NSF invites you, then you have up to 1 year to submit your full proposal. They'll put an email with the date at the top. Now, a full proposal, most agencies, it's around 15 pages. I've just shown a sample for the NSF, kind of the outline to show you what goes into it. There's about 15 pages of actual writing, what they call a project description. You can see the kind of the breakdown, what goes into it, elevator pitch and commercial opportunity and technical solution, company and team. So they give you the outline, what goes into it. There's a 1-page project summary, references page, resumes or bio sketches. There's a 1-page budget, 2 to 3 page budget justification or narrative, and then various forms, and you're allowed letters of support. Phase 1, you have up to 3 letters of support. Phase 2, you can have up to 5. So by the time you put this all together, it's usually between 40 to 50 pages. So it's a pretty heavy lift. And the Phase 2 grant is around 90 to 100 pages. So, but the actual writing is 15 pages plus a couple for the budget. So part of it is the purpose is to commercialize technology. So you'll have to do a commercialization plan. You have to, that's one of the differences between SBIR funding. It's the purpose is to commercialize technology. So you have to talk about who's the market, what's the size of the market, what are the market segments, who's your company or team, for employees, for consultants, for advisors, and then what is your technology, and then how you're going to finance it, and what's your revenue model, how are you going to make money, what's your business model. You'll have to put together a cost proposal, and this is one of the challenges. It's government accounting, so you have to divide everything into what they call direct costs, which are like material, labor, travel, and indirect costs, which most small companies aren't familiar with, but that's your cost for running your company. So that includes fringe benefits on employees. It could be rent, insurance, utilities, accounting, legal, your time working on just indirect items. So you have to propose a rate. Most companies don't have what's called a federal negotiated indirect rate. Universities like the UCs or CSUs, they might have a 55–60% indirect rate. So every federal contract they get, they take that 55–60% off the top just for running the university. But you get to do the same thing. You get to take off an indirect rate to run your company. So you want to make sure you propose a large enough indirect rate. And then also a fee or profit, you're allowed up to 7%. I suggest taking the full 7% because it's the most flexible money you're going to get. If it helps you as a buffer, if you underestimate up here, or you can use this for patent expenses, or buy yourself a laptop or whatever. So once you say you put your proposal together, then you have to submit it. Each one of the agencies has their own submission platform. That's what drives me crazy. So NIH uses grants.gov, the DOD has their own, NSF has their own proprietary. So there's a different submission platform for each of them. There's several registrations you have to do. Anytime you're doing business with the government, you have to do what's called a SAM registration, system for award management. That's how they pay you as a bank account information. So those things take some time, and we have resources that can help you with that. There's also the PTAX, which they just renamed now. It's a Apex Accelerators. I think they can help with that. So you submit it. then they'll do a review. Again, it takes 5 or 6 months for granting, maybe 90 days for contracting. These are the things they look at. Scientific merit and your team and your budget. Does the budget match the work plan? Or you have too much budget and too little work plan, other way around, too little budget, too much work plan. Qualifications of your team. The principal investigator, I should mention, you don't have to have a PI or PhD to be a PI. Like I was the PI, principal investigator in my contract. I just have a Bachelor of Science in Engineering Sciences and an MBA. But the review panel people, a lot of them have PhD, so they might have some bias, but there's no requirement for it. Some of the reasons you get declined, just you don't follow the format. They tells you 1-inch margins, 11-point type. The work plan doesn't have enough specifics. It's not unique enough. It's straightforward engineering. The team doesn't have the expertise to carry it out. So those are some of the things that might be declined. If you are declined, you can resubmit. You can take the review panel comments and then make some adjustments and resubmit. I was actually declined the first time around. I took some of the review panel comments, made some improvements, added a different graphic to kind of clarify some stuff, and was successful that second time around. So I have a lot of clients that do, submit, second time and, try to address some of the review panel comments. Now, you don't know if there's 3 or 4 reviewers, you definitely want to address common weaknesses of all 3 or 4 and identify something, you identify that. But if there's 1 or 2 that have unique ones, and you have to decide whether they want to address it or not. And then you're not guaranteed to getting the same review panel the next time either. So you might address all of them, but then who knows, there might be new concerns for the next review panel. In conclusion, it's a great program. There's about almost $4 billion available, but it is for innovative R&D, and you have to have some degree of risk. It's something that's not proven. It's novel, it's new, not for straightforward engineering. And the key to success is you have to be responsive to one of the agency needs or topics, and then you have to show that there's a commercial application that you can build a business around this, and then have that detailed work plan and have the team that can carry it out. So that is a overview of the program. So I'll stop it there, and I don't know how you handle questions, Kelly, but
well, Chuck, let me jump into the question box and also into the chat box. I think we have a little of each, but let's start with the first question that we have. And what are the chances that DOE, the Department of Energy, would support a gas and oil service company tech project?
Well, I guess it depends on what you mean by gas and service oil project. So they have the DOT has a solicitation twice a year. So some of the topics are very high tech. They're like fusion technology and that type of thing. But then there's other topics that are around different types of fuel. So they could be building efficiency. So they have a lot of different topics. Now it can't be service related. It's got to be a technology related topic. So they don't fund service related activity. So it's got to be some sort of technology proposal that you're doing. So I guess I need to know a little bit more about what they're proposing. But
okay, so if you have any questions, go to the Q&A box and put them in there. We'll randomly jump into the chat, the webinar chat, to see if we have questions for you. And actually, to go through it as well, Sandra's contact, I'll provide that to you, Trudy. I'll jump into that after the webinar and get that to you by email. You'll see Maureen has put a bunch of actually landing spots for you if you really want to get adventurous. The power pitch is there through bakersfieldwomen.org. If you have more questions about the SEO and Google Ad project, you see Jimmy's email, ZXU3 at CSU.edu. Also in chat is the YouTube channel with a lot of our former webinars, not all of them, but a lot of them. Sky, we will work on getting splitting the screen and see if I can do that. That's one thing I haven't jumped into as far as moving around a lot of the boxes. And sometimes when there's a lot of text, it makes it difficult, but definitely something to look into. Here's a question. I have a grant through the California Manufacturing Technology Consultants. Can we still work with SBIR?
Yeah, so you working with CMTC, it sounds like.
Yes.
California Manufacturing. Yeah, I actually have a couple grant projects I've been working on with CMTC over the last year. We're doing cybersecurity we were placing student interns actually at SBIR companies, and they're a good partner of our CMTC, but they are funded separately. So yeah, you can still apply for SBIR. In fact, they love to work with SBIR clients. So I've got 3 grants, governor's office grants I've worked with CMTC on, but they love to work with SBIR clients.
And I think you covered this. I think it was asked a little earlier, but you do need to be a business in order to apply for SBIR grants.
Yeah, so when you do like your project pitch to NSF, you don't have to have a corporation or LLC in place, but once you do the full proposal, then since you have to do all these registrations, you have to do system forward management, which means you have to have an EIN number, and then it used to be what they call a DUNS number. Now you have to get what's called a UEI, Unique Entity Identifier. So all those things you would have to have in place to basically apply. Then, but yeah, you don't have to for the project pitch, but for the full proposal, you would need to have that in place.
Okay. I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of issues regarding refunding SBIR that came up last year.
Yeah.
Congress took a very steady look at this. There was allegations. Well, there was allegations. And it looks like they've obviously refunded it. How secure does funding look moving forward?
Yeah, that was, because they refunded, it was the reauthorization like 6 or 7 years prior to that. And some of the same issues came up, but one of the issues, and I know Senator Rand Paul was concerned about too, is these companies that were, as I mentioned, the SBIR mills, and particularly even DoD has some big problems where they get 20 or 30 grants, they never commercialize anything. So they did put in place some metrics where you have to show that you meet, a certain conversion to commercialization. So they're trying to address that. And then there's also concern about, whether China would be stealing any of our secrets and other things too. So that's the cybersecurity issue. So they were concerned about that, and fraud, waste, and abuse. They put some additional requirements in there. So they reauthorized it for another 3 years now, because we were sweating it out because they waited till September 29th to reauthorize it when it expired on September 30th. But hopefully it's a real popular program, I guess I would say, in Congress, but some of these issues about not commercialization and cybersecurity and secrets being sold to other countries, they're having to deal with that a little more. But hopefully they'll do reauthorization again in 3 years. So.
And one last question here is for granting agencies. Would I go directly to those granting agencies to apply for the grants they offer?
Yeah, so you go to each one of them, and you can just Google like NSF SBIR or NIH SBIR. The first thing that pops up, it'll take you there, and you always want to look for the solicitation, which is the instructions set how to apply. Or you can go to the SBI.gov site, and they have links to each one of the agencies as well. But yeah, you apply directly to them. And as I mentioned, they each have their own proprietary, it's different outlines, different submission platform, different budget forms, but they're similar, but they have their own unique ones for each one of them. And you can apply to more than one. You could apply to, I have clients that have like a DOE, NSF, or NIH clients. You can't be double funded. They don't want you to double dip, so you can't apply for the same funding to multiple agencies. And one of the things I forgot to mention before we go too on this is, as far as getting additional funding, they also have what they call Phase II-B funding. So once you have a Phase II award, you can apply for Phase II-B funding. Well, they'll match a third-party investor. So up to, like NSF will match up to $1 million. If you had an angel investor, they'll match 50 cents on the dollar. They'll give you another $500,000, extend your grant for another 2 years, your Phase II. NIH, DoD, the DOE, they all have Phase II-B funding. So it's something to keep in mind. If it could be an incentive for your investor. You could say, I can leverage your money with some additional non-dilutive funding, but you have to have a active Phase II award before you can apply for that.
Great stuff, Chuck. As always, appreciate it. And got to figure out a way to work together. Got to find some projects out here.
Yeah.
San Joaquin Valley is not a very popular spot for SBIR projects over the last dozen years or so.
Yeah, they tend to be concentrated in Bay Area, Los Angeles, Orange County, San Diego. It's fewer, inland. We have some grants we're working on to maybe promote some of that in the inland regions, I think, a little more.
So yeah, so we'll be talking off Zoom on some of these issues that maybe we could resolve in order to. I have some ideas as well on doing these try to do one every year at least. This topic, great topic, great presentation, Thank you so much for joining us, Chuck.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We'll have you back.
There.
So we'll be back next week, number 263. And until then, thanks again to Chuck Eason, Maureen Busherding, our fine producer. If not, one of the best marketing consultants you're going to find here in Kern County. So thank you to Maureen. And we will be back next week, 262. Everybody have a great week. So long, everybody. Bye-bye.